God, I pray that you just light a fire in our hearts today just to see something we didn't see before in your word, God. God, I pray that you bless everyone in this room today. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, y'all can be seated. We're going to be in the book of Daniel today as we look at what it means to not to compromise. This is sort of a message geared towards our graduates a little bit, and really it's to all of us. While you're turning there, we're getting started. We do have a baby dedication next week on Mother's Day. If you're interested in participating in that, we need to know that probably by Wednesday so we can have everything ready for you for that. So just let myself or Shelly know, or Rodney. Also, there's a VBS lunch today. If you're planning on helping with VBS, there's a lunch after the service today to kind of get some information and get that rolling. We're just a little over a month out, so maybe less than a month out. So we would love to see you be part of that. All right. So we've been going through this series called Living a Life Worthy of the Gospel. What does it mean to live a life worthy of the gospel? And we've spent a lot of our time focused on how transformation happens in our life, because if we really want to make a difference in the world, we have to be people who are transformed. We can't be like the world. We have to be who God created us to be. We spent a lot of time talking about our identity. We're going to talk about that again today as we look at Daniel, because what we're going to see with Daniel is we're going to see somebody who would not compromise. And that's what the world is looking for. The world is looking for people who do what they say, that they live out what they believe. When we don't live out what we believe, regardless of what that is, whether that's Christianity or anything, when we don't live out what we say we believe, we become hypocrites, doing one thing and saying another. And we certainly don't want to do that. So we're going to look at Daniel's life and see what happens here. We're going to see kind of how the world creeps into our life and see what we do to kind of stay strong. So we're going to start in Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and laid siege to it. The Lord handed King Jehoiakim of Judah over to him, along with some of the vessels from the house of God. Nebuchadnezzar carried them to the land of Babylon, to the house of his God, lowercase g. He doesn't worship the God of the Bible. And put the vessels in the treasury of his God, again, lowercase g. The king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the Israelites from the royal family and from the nobility, young men without any physical defect, good-looking, suitable for instruction in all wisdom, knowledgeable, perceptive, and capable of serving in the king's palace." People like me. That's kind of what I was thinking there. Just kidding. It says he was to teach them the Chaldean language and literature. Now, let me explain what's going on here. As this nation, Babylon, conquers Jerusalem, they want the best and the brightest, and then they're going to indoctrinate them with their culture. It's basically, I don't care what you used to believe. We're going to teach you to believe this and believe our culture. And they basically want to change who they are. So that's the idea here. He wants to teach them the Chaldean language and literature. The king assigned them daily provisions from the royal food and from wine that he drank. They were to be trained for 3 years, and at the end of the time, they were to attend to the king. Among them, from the Judites, were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief eunuch gave them names. He gave them the name Belshazzar to Daniel, Shadrach to Hananiah, Meshach to Mishael, and Abednego to Azariah. Now, let me explain what's happening here. In the grand scheme of things, this seems sort of minor. We're going to change what you eat. We're going to teach you our language and our culture, and we're going to change your name. Seems kind of harmless. And let's be honest, this is how the world creeps into our life, is by things that seem harmless. We've talked a lot about identity, and we've talked a lot about names, and names are very important in the Bible. changing Jacob's name to Israel, changing Abram's name to Abraham, and Sarah's name to Sarah, Sarai to Sarah. Those names are inflecting God, the word Yahweh, into their name. And Jacob's from the deceiver to the one who's striven with God. And we see this time and time again because these names mean something. So let's just look at what Daniel and his friends' names mean. Daniel's name means God is my judge. Hananiah's name means Yahweh is gracious. Mishael's name means who is like God. And Azariah's name is Yahweh has helped. Now, when they use the word Yahweh, he's talking about the God of the Bible. I mean, that's who these guys are named after. They're Jews. They've grown up in this culture. That's who their parents, that's how they saw them to be, right? So when they want to change their name, they're really wanting to change their identity. And so Belshazzar, Daniel, changed to Belshazzar, means Baal protects his life. Baal is a god that they worship. So God is my judge to this other god, Baal protects his life. Hananiah, Yahweh is gracious, changed to Shadrach, which means command of Aku. Aku is another god that they worship. Mishael, who is like God, changed to Meshach, which is who is like Aku. They're trying to relate him to that's who he's like. Azariah, Yahweh has helped me, it changes to Abednego, which means servant of Nego, which is another god that they worship. So you can see that this name change is trying to change who they are and who God created them to be. And this is important. And then we go back to this whole thing about the food. If you know about Jews, they're strict on what foods they can eat and what they can't. And either part of what they were asking them to eat was foods that they considered to be unclean, or these were foods that had been served with when they were worshiping idols. And both of those are forbidden for Jews to eat. So we have this moment here, right? And this is what happens, is this is how culture tries to bleed into our life and change who we are. There's people who try to speak things into our life that may not be true. You're not good enough. You're a failure. You'll never amount to anything. You're just like your dad, or you're just like your mom, or all these things that we've been told our whole life. They begin to creep in, and it begins to be our identity. We begin to take that on. And it's not truly who God made us to be. So here's the question I guess I have for you. Is where is the world trying to rename you? Those of you who are getting ready to go to college, I'm here to tell you, you're getting ready to see culture like you've never seen before, and most of it is ungodly. And this is where you've got to decide, and this is why we've looked at this passage, and we're going to see the decision that Daniel makes here in a minute. But here's what I want you to understand. These, what seemingly seem like small, insignificant decisions, are very important in your life. Very important. What we believe and what we do is important as who we are. I used to do a lesson to FCA all the time in the middle schools and high schools. It was not, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? But who do you want to be when you grow up? We spend all of our time in school. What do you want to be? I mean, we even ask these guys up here because it's how our culture is. What do you want to do? What do you want to do when you graduate? But here's the real question. Who do you want to be? Do you want to be a great mother? Do you want to be a great father? Do you want to be a great husband? Do you want to be someone who's known as somebody who's a follower of Jesus Christ? Is that who you want to be? And those are decisions that you need to make now in your life, regardless of how old you are, is to stand firm in that. And this whole renaming thing, it starts with this compromise, and it starts small. You just think about in our culture today, addiction is a huge deal in our culture. I don't believe that there's anybody who woke up and one day said, you know what, I think I'll become a drug addict. Or I think I'll become an alcoholic today. It's never the way this happens. It happens with a small step. It's one drink. It's one time. It's nobody will know. Everybody else is doing it. It's all these things. It's what's the big deal? It's just one look at this. And all these little decisions that we make have a huge impact. One comment about failure spoken to us from somebody, we begin to wear that. Somebody says you're not good enough or you'll never amount to anything. Seems like a small comment when you think about their life as a whole, but people begin to wear that. This is true for those of you guys who are in high school and who are in middle school. It's a cruel world. We've talked about this before, is that popularity and once you graduate high school is not even a thing. It's just not. What people see as popular in high school and middle school, and they make fun of people who are not and all these things, that goes away when you graduate. It doesn't exist. And when people speak that into you, you can begin to wear that. That, oh, well, you're not like me. And that begins, those little things, those little steps begin to latch onto us, and we begin to take on that identity. We let other people speak into our lives who we shouldn't allow to speak into our lives. But here's what we see. I guarantee you in this culture, in Daniel's time, there are many who did compromise. Well, it's just some meals. It's just a name. I'm just going to go along with it. But what we see here is we see 4 men who did not compromise. So let's keep going. Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. Daniel determined that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine he drank. So he asked permission from the chief eunuch to not defile himself. So I guess I have a question here. Do we think that Daniel decided today that he was not going to defile himself? Or do you think he made that decision a long time ago? I feel fairly certain that Daniel didn't say, you know what, I've been eating some pork over here, and it's been no big deal. But today's the day. I'm not going to do it today. I don't believe that's the case at all. See, Daniel made the decision to not defile himself long before it became a huge temptation for him. And this is true in your life as well. If you can make the decision, this word determined here, your translation may say proposed, means to lay upon violently. Does this sound like a decision that he's just flipping about? Well, I'm just going to decide not to defile myself. It says, no, to lay upon violently, to bring to pass, to set into place. This is in a culture where they did not honor God, and Daniel said, you know what, with my life, I'm not going to compromise. He determined, and this is how we control the drift in our life, is we don't compromise even on the small things, because these small things matter. So we see that in Daniel's life. Let's keep going. It says, so he asked for permission from the chief eunuch to not defile himself. God had granted Daniel kindness and compassion from the chief eunuch. Yet he said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and drink. What if he sees your face as looking thinner than the other younger men your age? You would endanger my life with the king. Now let's just think about this for a minute. When a king gives an edict, you have to follow it. And we're going to see that in a minute, because the king is going to make a declaration in Daniel chapter 6 that he himself can't take back, because it's in writing. So whatever the king says goes. They could lose their life. Even the eunuch who's helping Daniel could lose his life. That's what's at stake right here. And Daniel had made his decision. He had purposed his life moving forward that he was not going to defile himself. He was not going to eat things that were unclean. The key here for determining that is he did it before the crisis. And it is a decision of faith. And we talked about this earlier, but the world expects this of us as Christians. We as Christians, we talk a good game about what we believe. But the world wants to know, do we really believe it? When the rubber meets the road and when it's really on the line, are we going to stand up for what we believe? Our actions should match our words. So let's keep going. So Daniel said to the guard, whom the chief eunuch had assigned to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servant for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then examine our appearance and the appearance of young men who are eating the king's food, and deal with your servants based on what you see. He agreed with him about this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, they looked better and healthier than all the other young men who were eating the king's food. So the guard continued to remove their food and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. Keep going. God gave these 4 young men knowledge and understanding in every kind of literature and wisdom. Daniel also understood visions and dreams of every kind. At the end of that time, the king had said to present them. The chief eunuch presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king interviewed them, and among all of them, no one was found equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they began to attend to the king. In every manner of wisdom and understanding that the king consulted them about, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and mediums in his entire kingdom, and Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. So here we see Daniel in enemy territory. This is who conquered them, and he has the ear of the king because he remained faithful. God blessed him. Now, let's turn over to Daniel chapter 2. Daniel is able to interpret dreams. That's part of the gift that God gave him. So the king has a dream, and he needs somebody to interpret it. Look at verse 27. So Daniel answered the king, "No wise man, medium, magician, or diviner is able to make known to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has let the king Nebuchadnezzar know what will happen in the last days. Your dreams and the visions that came into your mind as you lay in bed were these. Your Majesty, while you were in bed, thoughts came to your mind about what will happen in the future. The revealer of the mysteries has let you know what will happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have more wisdom than anyone living, but in order that the interpretation might be made known to the king and that you may understand the thoughts of your mind." Jump down to verse 46 in Daniel chapter 2. So he tells him the dream. It says in verse 46, "Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell face down and worshiped Daniel and gave orders to present an offering and incense to him. The king said to Daniel, 'Your God is indeed the God of gods, Lord of kings, and revealers of mysteries, since you were able to reveal this mystery.'" So here we've got Daniel, who's stood firm in what he believes and who he is. He didn't let his identity be changed by what people said about him and tried to speak into him. He was determined. He was purposed in who he was, and God blessed him. And he's gotten the ear of the king. And now we see the king even trying to worship Daniel. That's the influence that he had. And the king Nebuchadnezzar has claimed Daniel's God to be the God of gods. Now, don't get all excited. Nebuchadnezzar's not going to hang out there, and that's going to be the rest of his life. It says, "Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many generous gifts. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief governor over all the wise men of Babylon. At Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to manage the province of Babylon, but Daniel remained in the king's court." So now here these guys are in this foreign nation giving an influence of the God of Israel, of the God of the Bible. So now let's jump over to Daniel chapter 3. So Nebuchadnezzar, I told you his faith didn't last long. He next makes a golden statue. And the decree is that everybody has to worship it. Not the God of gods that he talked about in Daniel, but this statue. Well, that creates a problem for Daniel and his friends. So let's pick it up in Daniel chapter 3, verse 15. It says, "Now if you're ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither." What's a zither? Cadence, you're a music. Where's cadence? What's a zither? No clue? Riley, what's a zither? You play a zither? I don't even know what that is. All right, so we're going to keep going with the zither. All right, what verse was I in? 15. It says, "The zither, the lyre, the harp, the drum, and every kind of music fall down and worship the statue I made. But if you don't worship it, you will be immediately thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God who can rescue you from my power?" So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer to this question. If the God we serve exists, then he can rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he can rescue us from the power of you, the king. But even if he does not rescue us, we want you as king to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up." Now think about this no compromise right here from Daniel's friends. Daniel's not in this picture here. This is just his friends. And their life is on the line. And he wants an answer. And he says, I'll give you an answer. We're not worshiping any other God. And my God can rescue me. But if he can't, it's not going to change his decision. And here's what I want us to know. We're reading these passages about Daniel, and everything turns out great for him. But there are many people in the Bible, many people across this world. There are people who will today die for their faith in this world because they will not denounce the God of the Bible. Doesn't mean that our life is going to be easy. Doesn't mean that if we stand firm, we're not going to face trouble. There are people in parts of the world, luckily this is not in our part of the world, but there are people in parts of the world that when they make this decision that these guys are making, it will cost them their life. And they stood firm, no compromise. So look what happens. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with rage, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He gave orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than was customary. He commanded them, the best soldiers in his army, to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the furnace of the blazing fire. So these men, in their trousers, robes, and head coverings, and other clothes, were tied up and thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. Since the king's command was so urgent, the furnace was extremely hot, and raging flames killed those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And then these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the furnace of blazing fire. Then King Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in alarm, and he said to his advisors, "Did we throw 3 men bound into the fire?" "Yes, of course, your majesty," they replied to the king. He explained, "Look, I see 4 men, not tied, walking around in the fire, unharmed, and the 4th looks like the son of the gods." Now this right here is a Christophany. This is Jesus Christ who has appeared in this moment with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The God of the Bible is here to save them. And this is what they say. It says, Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of the blazing fire and called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and said, "You servants of the Most High God, come out." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. And when the satraps and prefects, governors, and the king's advisors gathered around, they saw that the fire had no effect on the bodies of these men. Not a hair of their head was singed. Their robes were unaffected, and there was no smell of fire on them. Nebuchadnezzar exclaimed, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel and rescued his servants who trusted in him. They violated the king's command and risked their lives rather than serve and worship any god except their own gods. Therefore, I issue a decree that any one of the people, nation, or language who says anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be torn limb from limb, and his house will be made a garbage dump. For there is no other God who is able to deliver like this." And then the king rewarded Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And see, this is a picture. We see these pictures of Jesus throughout the Old Testament, these Christophanies, and he's basically showing who he is. He's a Savior. That's what he does. He walks through the fire with us. He saves us. And that's what he does. It says, what did it say? There's no other God who will be able to deliver like this. Jesus Christ is a deliverer. That's what he does. And we see Daniel and his friends stayed true, no compromise. So let's turn over to Daniel chapter 6. Probably the most famous story in Daniel. We're going to start in verse 10. So the king makes a decree that you cannot pray to any other gods. And if you do, you'll be thrown in the lion's den. So now Daniel has to make a decision. So let's pick it up in Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. It says, when Daniel learned that the document had been signed, he went into his house. This is the document that says, the king's document that cannot be reversed, even by the king, that if you pray, you will be thrown into the lion's den to be killed. When Daniel learned that the document had been signed, he went into his house. The windows in his upstairs room opened toward Jerusalem, and 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed and gave thanks to God, just as he had done before. You know what that is? No compromise. This is who he is. He prayed yesterday. He prayed the day before yesterday. He prayed the day before that. And this decree was not going to stop him. He was going to pray to God. It says, then these men went as a group and found Daniel petitioning and imploring his God. Think about how they describe Daniel's prayer right there. Petitioning and imploring his God. Daniel's praying fervently. So they approached the king and asked about his edict. Didn't you sign an edict that for 30 days that any person who petitions any god or man except you, the king will be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, as a law of the Medes and the Persians, the order stands and is irrevocable. Then they replied to the king, Daniel, one of the Judean exiles, has ignored you and the king's edict you signed, for he prays 3 times a day. Now keep in mind, this king loves Daniel. Daniel has been good to him. And this is going to upset the king. Verse 14, as soon as the king heard this, he was very displeased. He set his mind on rescuing Daniel and made every effort until sundown to deliver him. Then these men went together to the king and said to him, you know, your majesty, that it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no edict or ordinance the king establishes can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you continually serve, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet rings of his nobles, so that nothing in regard to Daniel could be changed. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and he could not sleep. Think about where this story has gone. The king is now praying for Daniel because Daniel didn't compromise. It says he couldn't sleep. Verse 19. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he reached the den, he cried out in anguish to Daniel. Daniel, servant of the living God, the king said, has your God, whom you continually serve, been able to rescue you from the lions? Then Daniel spoke with the king. May the king live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, and they haven't harmed me, for I was found innocent before him, and also before you, your majesty. I have not done harm. An angel shut the mouth of the lion. Who do you think that was? Probably another Christophany. That's probably Jesus Christ. It says the king was overjoyed and gave orders to take Daniel out of the den. When Daniel was brought up from the den, he was found to be unharmed, for he trusted in his God. The king then gave the command, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and thrown into the lion's den, and their children and their wives, and they had not reached the bottom of the den before the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to the people, the nation and the language who live in the whole earth, may your prosperity abound. I issue a decree that in all my royal dominion, people must tremble in fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end. He rescues and delivers. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth, and he has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. That could be in the Gospels, what this king said about Daniel because of his faithfulness. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So here's what we see. We see Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego. We see these guys take these great steps of faith. And here's what I want us to learn from this. These great steps of faith didn't start as great steps of faith. They typically start as small steps of small faith. Just think about King David for a minute. King David took on Goliath, but when he was getting ready to take on Goliath, do you remember what he said? I've killed the lion and the bear. God was training him for the steps that he needed to take in his faith. Daniel and his friends had been training for that moment long before they got to that moment. And it happens in the small steps of faith. You and I, each and every day, have these small steps of faith that God gives us the opportunity to take. And we can take those as a training ground and begin to strengthen our faith and take those small steps of faith so that one day we can take the big steps of faith. Because that's how God does it. So I don't know what your next step of faith is. Maybe it's baptism. Maybe it's standing up for someone else. Maybe it's standing firm in your job. Maybe it's beginning to pray at your meal at work. I don't know what your step of faith is. But it may seem small to you. But there's a reason that it's on your heart and your mind. God wants you to take that step that may seem insignificant and see what he does with it. I'm going to ask Cameron to come up here. I got a couple verses I want to read. They're not on the screen, mainly because I just got tired of doing slides, honestly. 1 Corinthians 10:31, so whether you eat or drink and whatever you do everything for the glory of God. Colossians 3:23 and 24, whatever you do it from the heart as something done for the Lord and not for people, knowing that you will receive the reward of an inheritance from the Lord. You serve the Lord Jesus. Proverbs 16:3, commit your activities to the Lord and your plans will be established. 1 Corinthians 15:58, therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the Lord's work, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Romans 12:11, do not lack diligence and zeal, but be fervent in the Spirit and serve the Lord. If we are faithful in the small things, we can be faithful in the big things. But if we're not faithful in the small things, we'll never be faithful in the big things. Graduates, determine in your mind, purpose in your mind today who you are going to be. That decision's made much easier today than it is on a Saturday night. Who are you going to be? Determine that right now and be it. Let's pray. God, we thank you for Daniel and his friends and their standing firm in their faith. God, help us to be people who are faithful in the small things that lead to being faithful in the big things. Help us to be people who don't compromise. Help us to be people who does not let the world speak into our lives a different identity than what you've called us to be. Help us to be faithful. Lead us with your Spirit, and the world will take notice. And God, you get